Welcome to the Southeast Retirement Planners Podcast, where we will go beyond the balance sheet with our guests, not only to share from our personal experience as financial advisors of over 25 plus years, but also to learn from our guests about the issues and topics that are important to them. Our firm specializes in taking care of the financial plans for individuals and small businesses by helping our clients identify their individual goals and taking a conservative and ongoing approach to helping accomplish them. We are located in Hickory, North Carolina, and look forward to continuing to serve our clients and our community. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. All right. Well, first I want to just welcome everybody back to the Southeast Retirement Planners Podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you need any information about this episode or anything that we do at Southeast Retirement Planners, please be sure to go to our website at www.seretirementplanners.com. You can check out any of the information on our podcasts and the other work that we do as well. And be sure to also like and subscribe if you're listening to us online or watching us on YouTube. Make sure you click like and subscribe so we can keep up with you on that. We'd love your feedback. So special guest today, our world-renowned radio host from right here in Hickory, the host of First Talk Radio, WHKY, Hal Rowe. Hal, thanks for joining me.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for the invitation. This is fun. This is nice. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be good. You know, we've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit through the years, and I've been able to come over onto your radio show a time or two and talk about all kinds of things.
Right.
And it just occurred to me that you've had such a significant influence in our community, and you've had access to our community in sort of a unique way. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. So I guess maybe start in the beginning. How did you give me a little bit of history about your background and that sort of thing?
Born and raised in Roanoke, Virginia. And when I was very young, I called our local radio station, WROV, and won a 45, Cracklin' Rosie. And I heard my voice being played back on the air, and it was just magic. And I said, this is what I want to do. So, the summer camp I attended had a radio station.
Okay.
And I was my high school correspondent, which gave us, we would go and be on the radio on Thursday nights and tell what was going on in your school. So that was a lot of fun. And then I got into TV for a while, and too much pancake makeup. They were like, you got a face made for radio. I really did. That was I've been
told that before myself.
That was me.
It.
So, and I made the decision. Worked in the furniture industry for a while, and worked in TV in that area of broadcasting for a while. Worked in advertising agency. But radio is really my love. I enjoy it quite a bit. I think that the theater of the mind and being able to imagine in a podcast, maybe what somebody looks like, or if we hear stories on the radio, whether we hear news stories or whether we just hear conversations, the things that we can come up with and imagine in our mind are sometimes much more pleasant or much more horrifying than they ever would be in real life. So it's a great medium. I love it. I still think it's going to survive. It's going to be good, and I like radio. So that's kind of a brief history.
Well, you haven't always been in Hickory, so
Yes,
you
sir.
grew up in Roanoke, and then
Yes, sir.
professionally, kind of where did that?
We moved here in 77. My father was in the furniture industry. I attended Lenore Ryan 77 to 81.
Yeah.
Worked in the furniture factories, so I have that part. And professionally, let's see here. I guess my first real paying radio gig was, that's taking me way back here. So let's go to the first real official, and that would have been in Norfolk, Virginia Beach Market. Was working at a country station, 100,000 watts that was nowhere, and classic rock had just started. So the Fox came in, and as you know, the Fox in Charlotte, and they've got them all over now. But that came in, and I decided I want to work here.
So when you say that, all I think about, and this is sort of dating me a little bit as well, but all I can think about in terms of you starting out in radio is WKRP.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like that, as a kid, that was, of course, TV was the thing, right?
Right.
So the only idea I would ever have about what it looks like in a radio station or whatever was that. I mean, how far off is that?
Pretty close.
Okay.
The fact that they didn't wear headphones. Johnny Fever did not,
Okay.
So I'm kind of a combination of, I think anybody in radio is kind of a combination of Les Nessman and Herb Tarlick, and everybody want to be as cool as Johnny Fever, but no one's, quite that cool. Probably closer to the big guy, Art Carlson, who I love,
Yeah.
So, but that was really a very good depiction of what a radio station is like. Jock sleeping on the furniture and And the big
because
guy,
you'd have the early morning hours, you'd have the late night guys
Right.
doing all kinds of different things. I
yeah.
assume.
So it's pretty close.
So where was your sort of time slot in there? Like what was the type
I
of
started
material
when I was
you were
working at the
doing?
country station before it was the greatest time in my life because I would get up. I was living 242 steps away from the Atlantic Ocean. I was living in Virginia Beach. We had a house landside. And I would get up at 10 o'clock at night and throw on a T-shirt and some shorts and flip-flops and go in and pull my country music. And then I'd get there about 11 and I'd play country from midnight to 6. And then I'd hang out with the morning guys and just kind of yuck it up. That's right,
right.
And be that guy who would spin the big wheel or go get coffee, whatever. And so that was the overnight shift. And then I really wanted, as the station transitioned, I really wanted to be on air and wanted to be on air talent, and didn't have the chops. And the program director spotted me on my way out, and in all candor, I was crying because I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't going to be on the air with this new station. He was like, "There's no crying in radio," to steal a phrase.
Right.
And he said, "Come on in, let's talk." So we sat down, and he listened to my air check. And said,
which would be your demo,
right? But it would be
right?
a cassette tape. It's a skim tape, and when you turn the microphone on, that recording starts, and then when you turn the microphone on, it's off. It stops. So it's just a little cassette deck off to the side. And so he listened to it, and he closed up. He goes, "Have you ever thought about promotions?" And scooted it back to me, which was not what I wanted to hear.
Right.
He said, "But I'll make you a deal." He said, "If you'll work 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Sunday mornings, and write down every word that comes off your skim tape," he said, "we'll see what we can do, see if we can help you out, get on the air." So I would have this amazing amount of verbiage from what I would have from that 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And this is the program director of a big radio station in a major market who would come in on Monday mornings and sit down and scratch through. It's not, look at the weather. What are you going to look at the weather? Are you going to look out the window? No, just say the weather. It's not some Rolling Stones. What did they play? Was it Brown Sugar? That was Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones. There's no such thing as a first annual. It's either the inaugural or first official. So these are little things that I learned and picked up. But I learned that from Bob, and that's how I kind of learned my chops. And from there, I did promotions. I worked in sales. I became a general manager of a station they started in another market. So my love is on-air work. I think it's what they call the Peter Principle, right? You rise to the level of your incompetence. And I found that I was not a very good general manager. I didn't like hiring and firing people.
Sure.
I liked doing the on-air part. And I had the opportunity to do that when I came back to Hickory. I worked in Florida, worked in South Carolina, worked in some different markets on air advertising, but just did that, up and down the dial like it says in WKRP.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it quite a bit. But a lot of different, and I really have. I've been the guy who goes and sets up the big inflatable fox, as they say in Charlotte, the big hairy fox.
Right.
I would be the guy who would go out and make sure that the cords were all duct taped down, and the van was, the wheels were Windexed when it parked, so it shone.
Yes.
And so I've done a little bit of that, but I've also had to, make sure that the station was compliant with FCC rules and regulations. I've had to run sales departments. So I've had been very, very fortunate that I've had a rich history in radio.
So was most of this after your time at Lenore-Rhyne?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
This is all.
So that's all post Lenore-Rhyne.
Yes, sir.
And then what brought you back to the area?
I was working as program director for, at the time it was Deep Cuts, for Dave Lingefelt in Newton. And I was programming that station and that was just prior to Howard Stern coming in. And I was commuting between Charlotte and Hickory and programming that station, and was having a good time doing it because we were playing, as the descriptive title said, Deep Cuts. And my father passed away. So I was right here, and I stayed in Hickory with Mom to kind of and she did a great job. I mean, she didn't really need any help, but I stayed in Hickory and got out of radio for a while and kind of took some time. I had a time in my period of time in my life where things were very dark, and I didn't realize it at the time, but was suffering from depression, and got out of the industry. And then one day I was driving to my job that I had at the time, and that's one of the things in radio. You never give up your driver. If they give you a company car, always have one in the garage because it could always go away.
Because they get in quickly, right?
Right, exactly. So always know how to work retail, work a register, or work
right.
waiting tables, because that's going to happen. I don't care whose career it is.
And I think everyone should have to. I mean, that's like advice for children or for teenagers these days? Like, you should have to work at a restaurant or work retail,
Yes.
and you should learn how to drive a straight drive.
Yes,
I mean, that's just,
yes, I totally agree with you.
Minimums at
all
that point.
those, absolutely. But I heard WHKY on the air, and I thought they don't have a live morning show. So I approached the management at the time and said, what do you think? And we kind of sat down and had some discussions, and it turned out that it worked. And 22 years later, it'll be 23.
I was going to say, you're coming up on 23 years.
23 years, yeah. So it's worked out pretty much. Key still fits the door, and I've been taken to the woodshed a few times. It's like, was that comedy that you were doing? It's like, maybe a poor attempt at it, but yeah, that was comedy.
Right.
It's like, maybe we don't want to do that anymore. But it's been a great gig. It's been a lot of fun.
Tell me a little bit more about that period of time. Where were you working? And then you said things weren't going well. Were you aware of it then? And then all of a sudden you just flip a switch and go, hey, I want to give this radio station a call? That's kind of an interesting turn.
Yeah, it was actually a guy that I was working with, and we were talking about it. And I knew that I had done this before, and I knew that I wanted to do it. And I was prayerfully considering where I wanted to be career-wise, and I did not. Nothing wrong with Media Play. Don't get me wrong. It was a great place. Enjoyed it. That's where I met Joe Barrett from the WHKY Weekly Movie Review,
yeah,
and a lot of other very cool people. But I did not want to work retail the rest of my life. That was not. And I knew that I'd had some experience. I was prayerfully considering where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And this may sound hokey to some people, but truly I believe that God guided me towards this and said, this is what I want you to do. And here's your opportunity. And I want you to fill out, get a resume and make a new tape and apply. And this is really what I want you to do. And I think that you'll be happy in it. And that's kind of how it went. It was a spiritual thing. So
I love that.
Yeah, I don't talk a lot about that, but that's really what it was. And the folks at WHKY, I had worked for them back in college when I was at LR. I had done the TV gig there. And then, I told you I'd worked in TV. That was WHKY. And so I knew the family, knew the Long family. And when I went and proposed the idea of coming back and doing a live show, they were looking for somebody to do a live morning show. That was missing.
So
in their
you
lineup.
didn't know they were looking for this.
No.
This was your idea, but it was also their idea at the same time.
They were looking. I was looking. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So it's kind of.
I would say that's kind of a spiritual thing.
Or it's kind of like Tinder.
Yeah. Oh,
right. They were looking. I was looking. It worked out. So, and I don't know much about Tinder.
Yeah, I know. I think that was maybe a misstep.
It was. I don't know anything about that. They were looking. I was looking. So it worked out. But
so that was 23 years ago. 20
yes, sir.
Something
2000, the millennium. All that had just happened, and we had gotten past the Y2K scare,
right.
And
which was terrifying.
There were people who bought lots of supplies that are still good.
Yeah.
But it was so it was right after that, and then I came back and started working with him. It was actually in October, and then we did a little tease for introducing the new product, and then the day after Thanksgiving, November 2000, we went on the air with First Talk. And
so looking at the history of radio, I guess, in some ways, you mentioned Howard Stern earlier. Howard Stern, Rush Limbaugh, those would probably be two giants in the radio industry. And this was prior to podcasts or anything like that, like what we get to do today.
Yes, sir.
How was that? Where were those things in the scope of your timeline as well? And how does that was that disruptive to local radio, or is that helpful, or how did that sort of integrate?
Well, Stern,
like Sirius radio, XM radio, all that stuff was kind of coming around in those 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, right?
Stern had always been around, always been a troublemaker. He was the guy who kind of broke a lot of, he was the guy who was going to get fined by the FCC all the time. And Limbaugh
Shock
was the
jock.
guy. Yeah. And Limbaugh was the guy who saved AM radio. Had it not been for Rush Limbaugh and talk radio, AM would have gone away. Talk radio never would have been. But I really think the power of radio is local radio, is where you could pick up the phone and call and say, who won the Hickory High game last night? Or we heard sirens last night. Was there what was going on, in my backyard? Or, there was whatever it may be, and introducing folks on a local level to local topics. So all this other stuff was going on, but still you always had your local radio stations. If you look at Morganton, they have what I would consider to be a local radio station with a local morning show. And the same with Lenore and Taylorsville. All these places have the morning guy, and the sports and the weather that you kind of go to, that if you're fortunate enough, people will turn the station on and consider that to be their friend or their companion as they're maybe driving to work. They get that news of what's going on. They get, brought up to speed on sports. I think traffic reports are a little silly in our area because I've lived in Atlanta, and
right.
and so it's like, yeah, you're going to have some traffic. It's going to be slow on 127 this morning.
It'll be okay.
But yeah, but I really believe that it's local radio, and I think that that's really, and that I think is you're able to generate revenue on a local level. You're talking to the people who are in your community. So as far as, I consider my job is to inform, to entertain, and to generate revenue for my employer. So that, I think, is local radio. So when you take a look at the Stearns and the Limbaughs, they were kind of way and far away from, that's like the 2%. That's at the very top. And they truly are. They are truly celebrities, or Rush was. And Howard, look at this guy. This is a shock jock, using foul language, and the guy is, on America's Got Talent, and is watching some, little girl ride a tricycle, and people are, oh, isn't that cute of Howard, and it's that guy's amazing to me. But those are the guys who make the big bucks, who do the big things with satellite radio. I believe there will probably be, and this is just my opinion, but what do I know? I believe there'll always be a market for terrestrial-based local radio. I believe that.
I was going to ask you about that. There's been so many twists and turns from a technology standpoint.
Yes, sir.
That I'm sure many people have predicted, like the end of newspapers, right? That the end of local radio and terrestrial radio would be over. Whether it was satellite or certainly now just the internet and YouTube and everything else. So, and there's digital radio that's available as well. So, how have you seen that kind of change the way has it changed the way you do things?
Well, I think probably, everybody has got a podcast. Everybody's got a podcast. But podcasts are, in my opinion, are nothing more than radio on demand. You're still telling stories. Yep. You're still doing that. I think that where the big demarcation line is when you have radio that is under the auspices of the Federal Communications Commission, and you have the opportunity that if you are somewhat less than honest, if you put out false information, there's still somebody there to kind of say, no, that's not correct.
Standards and checks and balances.
Standards is a great way to put it. Yes, sir. You have those. And I think that those will keep local radio honest. Think about today in emergency services. When emergency services, if there's a tornado coming, they don't say head down to your cellar with your cell phone. They say head down to your cellar with your radio.
Right.
And the twist, the battery powered, because these are going to be where you get local information that is reliable, that does have certain standards. So I think there's always going to be that place, and I can't really see anywhere in the near future. Now, if I had a kid and they were 20 years old, and they were taking a look at a 20-year career, I don't know that I would say, yeah, radio is going to be. But for the foreseeable future, I think that it's valid. It can make money. It can, and that's really, as much as people would like to consider it this great medium and a wonderful art form, it's about making money. It's a business. Ask Stern, ask Limbaugh. Could have asked Rush. This is what it's about. It's a business. So as long as you're going to be able to make money doing this business, and you're able to sell to local advertisers who are going to advertise in your local football games, who want to cover the sports, who want to cover the morning events and what's happening, local news. Where else really today, because you mentioned it, I don't want to pick on anybody else but the local newspaper, they're going to basically podcast, they're going electronic distribution.
Yep.
So what we used to be able to do is to pick up that morning, I don't know, but maybe with you, morning and evening newspapers.
Right.
And we used to be able to get that news delivered in that manner, in that fashion. And that's gone away, but you can still get local news that has a certain standard and has accountability through local radio. So I foresee that being able to be maintained as a business model for the foreseeable future.
Well, there's an argument to be made that local news that has to maintain a certain standard is the only place where mainstream media does not have to maintain a standard, it doesn't seem like anymore. So maybe local news actually has a standard where it seems like all the big news, all the big mainstream media they don't have that requirement anymore. As long as they're making money, they're fine with whatever's being said and however it's being said. So,
my opinion, very divisive. I think that it's very dangerous, and when we should treat news as news and opinion as opinion. I mean, there was always an editorial page in the newspaper, and I think that line is blurred. And I don't want to say that people would be dishonest, disingenuous, but I think that sometimes there's always been.
Oh, I would say that.
It's always.
You don't have to be on the record saying that. I'll say it for sure.
But if it bleeds, it leads, and sure, that's going to happen, and we're going to have that. And we're going to have the sensationalism. But when we have opinion and news become one and the same at a national level, no more Walter Cronkites who are going to deliver the news. Right. Then I think that, on a local level, when you hear news that way, then that and bring in community, into that's going to be, and I really do believe that people are thirsty for that. I think that they really want that.
You've been doing this for 23 years, and you've been able to bring that community and that connection, which I do think you're right. There's something, I wouldn't even go so far as to say nostalgic about it. There's something that's needed about having that connection where you introduce us on First Talk to people that are in the community that are doing things that are making a difference where we live. And that's really a breath of fresh air compared to all the other nonsense that is being sort of pushed at us. So back in the day when you first started, do you remember who your first guest was?
Yeah, we actually, it was either...
Did you start out doing First Talk? Was that when you said you started with live radio in the morning, did you start out hosting guests or were you just delivering content?
We were going to have guests as part, but we were actually taking a look at probably more governmental and more informational. And then we found out that, wow, there's a lot of people out here in the community who've got great stories. And in the days that when it was either Mary Miller with CVCC, who would be the first official guest, and she was actually there the day, after Thanksgiving, and she was the first. Then David Hood from Catawba County Board of Elections, at the time came on, and we were talking about hanging chads. That's how long ago that was. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's
people remember that. Yeah, because kids
down in Florida.
Yeah, who are just, they don't remember that election and all that going on. But after that, I'll tell you one of the guys who really helped me out a lot was Cass Ballinger, who was people would remember. And Cass had this great attitude because we talked to Tommy Luckadoo, who was working with Cass at the time, and said, is there any chance of getting our representative on the air? He said, well, I'll talk to him. And Mr. Luckadoo was a fan of the show and liked what we were doing. And Mr. Ballinger said, or Congressman Ballinger said, yeah, I'd be glad to be on. So we just talked to him. And it kind of gave it a stamp of approval. It made it okay to listen.
Yes.
Because it gave us some credibility. And it was a sign and a signal to other people that we may be wanting to have on the air, that it was not a we gotcha show. And it wasn't a show that was going to be attack radio.
And it wasn't all self-promotion either. I mean, obviously, Cass has made a tremendous impact on this area through his career as well. So to have somebody like that, a prominent figure, to be able to come in and say, hey, we're just having a conversation.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to sell you anything.
So to Mr. Tommy Luckadoo and to Mr. Ballinger, no longer with us, of course, but I owe them a great deal of thanks, as well as the Long family and the people who said, yeah, let's give it a try and let's see how this works.
So after all this time, sort of bringing, just on the radio side, bringing these guests and these stories, what are some of the stories that stick out to you? I'm sure you've had a few interesting ones.
The ones that have impacted me the most, and I think some of the most interesting stories, even though they are sometimes, I'll just use the word disturbing, are the folks who are survivors of 9/11. Because I've talked to people who were in the World Trade Center and people who were in the Pentagon and actually could tell us what it was like to be covered in jet fuel and to hear. It's interesting. They remembered the smells. They remembered the smells of what that jet fuel smelled like, because it was very pungent, very strong, and they remember that. Of course, the olfactory senses, those are the ones that bring back, they say, memories. Sure. So being covered in jet fuel and trying to get down the stairway in the dark and the smoke, and that really was very impactful. And in the Pentagon, being blown across the room and sitting there watching TV And this came from one of the guests. They were watching TV.
So this was, by the way, this was here in Hickory. Yeah. So it was local folks who were kind of recalling those experiences.
Now, one was a visitor to an area who was going to be giving a talk. Another one is a local resident.
Okay, right.
But talking about what that was like and hearing the sounds of the bodies as people jumped.
Yeah.
That's disturbing. But they remembered what that sounded like because it's a very unique sound. And it's a sound that you don't ever hear anywhere else except for when you're in that situation. It's a sound you and I hopefully would never hear.
Sure.
But that's a memory that they had. So there was something about the way that they talked about and told these stories that was very impactful. It was horrible. It was very disturbing. But those are the ones that kind of you remember, you know. And you remember stories that maybe helped people, you know. And when I think there's been a couple of situations where I knew that I thought I was doing what God wanted me to do. We had the domestic violence awareness folks on Rape Crisis Center, and there was a woman who was talking about if you were a victim of sexual assault and you haven't reported, don't care how long ago it was, you know, you need to report this. And she called me later that she had gone back to her office and a woman had called her and asked specifically to speak to her and said, I was a victim of domestic violence and sexual assault 20 years ago, and I've never disclosed. And I'm ready to do that. And that, to me, now talk about local radio. And you've got that happening on a local level.
Yeah.
And you've got one person. If nobody else, the whole thing has been for naught. You know, that one person who was able to get help and disclose that, you know, it's really something special. You know, that's when you know that, yeah, this is what you're and there's other stories like that. But that was one that made me say, okay, we're doing the right thing and we're doing it correctly and we're doing it in a way that impacts people on a local level and they're getting help and their lives are improved by what we do here. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, we'll talk about film festivals. You know, we'll talk about everything.
Pickleball.
You know, pickleball. We'll talk about pickleball.
Right.
You know, and being in, what is it called? The house. You're in the house.
Kitchen.
You're in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So we talk about all kinds of different stuff. It's not all that, but that's part of it. And so when you have that part of it and you're able to do that, man, there's just no reward like that. It's just incredible.
So how much time? Who kind of helps guide those decisions about guests and sort of where you want the conversation to go or those kinds of things? Is that you guys work as a team over there and put those ideas together? I've
had 3 really good call screener show producers. Susie Woods was the first one. I'd say Susie Woods, and you know, and for 5 years, no one really believed there was a Susie because she wouldn't come on the air. And then she became a very important part of the show. Then Mr. James McClellan, who was a call screener show producer for a short period of time, and then I've got Mr. Vince Gullett, who is in there now and working. And we work together on this, and we work, and it's pretty amazing the way that we find guests and guests find us. We had a show this morning on yoga.
Right.
You know, and who would have known? But yesterday, so we placed a call and, you know, we got an open spot. And just so happens that her morning was free and it's National Yoga Awareness Month. And so I find out that in battlefield situations, the United States military requires yoga for our fighting troops. Who knew that? You know?
I did not know that.
I did not know that. And there's the warrior pose, which supposedly helps with marksmanship. So, you know, you find out this stuff. But she was available. We were available. And for some reason, I don't know, it just works out. It's one of those things, man. It's really hard to define that part. And where do we get people? I mean, it's just really hard to put our finger on that. We'll find out what national celebrations or
sure.
But we try our best to bring them down to a local level. We don't have guests who are, you know, we don't talk to somebody in Arlington, Virginia who's talking about, you know, old Lone Ranger episodes. You know, it's interesting, but we just don't do that. We want to find people here on a local level. So that's I think what really, and you know, it's like, I don't know if you got a response from your time on First Talk or not, if anybody heard it or not, but you're a local guy and people will, if they listen to the podcast or if they go back and they hear you, oh, I know him, go to church with him, or I know him, he's my financial advisor. And that kind of helps, you know, continues on that road of local awareness and people on a local level.
Well, you know, you mentioned something there. I was going to bring this up. when you have some of these memorable guests, I know now you all have had to participate in sort of the new technology of social media and all that kind of stuff. So for people that don't know, if you don't listen live locally here, you can go to your website. You can follow you guys on Facebook, on WHKY, and you constantly are posting about who your guests are and how to gain access to that particular episode if you want to go back. So how have you archived all these 20 years?
You remember cassettes, right?
I do, of course.
So it's like a cassette. At the end of the week, we tape right over that cassette.
Yeah.
So we keep them for 5 days. That's it. So it used to be, if you're a very early guest, I don't know that anybody here would remember it or not, when we first started doing the show and you were on the show, we'd give you a cassette that you could take home.
You could take home with you.
Yeah, except played at the Christmas party. You have a few whiskey sours. Hey, I was on the radio.
Yeah, that's right.
Dad, please not again. And then we gave away CDs. So that you had a CD, so you could take it out to your car and listen to it on the way home. And now, of course, we give you a link. That you can listen to the show.
But all the stuff is out there now. Yeah. Do you go? How far back do you know? Do you remember?
We don't have it archived. It's gone after 5 days.
Oh, even online, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah,
really.
After 5 days. So if I want to go air check myself, I will have to do it in a couple of days. If I say, "Wow, that was really good. What did I do well?" Or "Wow, that was really pathetic. That was really sad." That should have never made it. Should have never made it all together. Yeah, should not have said that.
Right.
So I got to go back in. I got to catch it. I got to listen to it because it's gone. It's gone in 5 days. Now, if we send you something, you're able to archive that yourself. But we don't keep it around. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But
that's interesting.
We just don't keep it around. I wish sometimes that we did.
I was just actually getting ready to plug the idea of going back and pulling up some of those memorable episodes of people and their 9/11 memories and that kind of thing, because that would be really interesting to go back and hear.
Don't have them. One of the things that I really just hate this is we used to when we would talk with somebody before they'd leave, they'd go sit down in the production studio and say, like, "I'm Bob Fincher. You're listening to First Talk, or you're listening to WHKY." So and that would be your name, and we would use it as station. And they got rid of all of them. We had Cass Ballinger. We had all kinds of people who'd been there and done the little, just a little bit, just saying who they were and a little bit about, and it wasn't saying, and I think this is my favorite radio station, or this is a great radio station. We just invite them to listen, or you're listening to, and all those are gone.
Yeah.
So all those are just, pleasant memories. So.
A good note to remind everyone is to seize the day, right? Take in the moment. It's not always going to be here, even though I feel like now everything is archived, right?
Yeah.
And we can always go back and refer to, or sort of thankful in some ways we can't go back and refer to some of those things that we used to say. And that's another reason,
too. Yeah, it's gone. Sorry, Your Honor. That's gone. We lose them after 5 days, Your Honor. Sir, yeah.
I'm glad we didn't have cell phone cameras when I was in college and that kind of thing. So I'm thankful for that.
Yes, sir.
Well, because you've been such a part of this community for so long, and part of what you do is inform and entertain as well, how have you seen things change over the last 20 plus years?
I've seen a lot more cooperation between local governments. It used to be municipalities just kind of didn't like each other very much and really didn't care a lot about other municipalities. I've seen, the counties in the area starting to realize and understand that, everybody benefits from investment. And so I've seen a lot more of that. I've seen a lot of the cooperation. Our mayor, Hank Guest, likes to talk about relationships, and, it all comes down to relationships. I've seen relationships grow over the years that did not used to exist. I mean, you go back and take a look at some of the, folks who were in different positions at certain times. There was not a lot of cooperation. There was not a lot of esprit de corps. We were all moving in the same direction. That's one of the biggest things that I've seen, is that everybody has kind of, said, okay, let's all get together on this. And if we're not going for the same goal, at least we can disagree without being disagreeable. So I've seen that in local governments, and I think that's probably the biggest change I've seen.
Seen a lot of growth.
Yes, sir.
I mean, and even certainly since your time on radio, but even going back to your time at Lenore Ryan, just to see industry be such a huge cornerstone of this area, and then seemingly go away potentially forever, and now coming back, and then seeing our downtown development area association just really start building up our downtown and become more and more attractive. And of course, everything's blowing up outside of Charlotte and getting closer and closer. And Appalachian State's campus and Lenore Ryan working with community colleges and all that kind of stuff. So
very exciting time to be
a lot of
here.
growth.
Yes, sir.
It sure is. Well, I want to leave us with just a couple of thoughts. And one of the things with Southeast Retirement Planners, we like to help people manage their financial affairs in a lot of different ways. And sometimes that can be very complex. And we do a lot of complex work for people. And sometimes it can be pretty simple as well. Just kind of help people get on track and do things the way that they're supposed to do. Right. What's one of the worst pieces of financial advice that you've ever been given? You know, you'd given me some questions that we were going to go over, and I had to think about that, but not very long. WorldCom. Yeah, get you some WorldCom because it's coming back, right? It's coming back. So, you know, it may be valued at 2 cents now, but invest because there's, you know, it's too big to fail. That was before people were too big to fail. So, very simply, WorldCom, worst financial advice I ever got. I invested and lost every bit of it. Yeah, all of it. Hopefully, you didn't invest too much into it.
You could invest, $100 and you'd have half the company. Yeah, really. It would have been gone. So, yeah, but it was, not a whole lot there.
Yeah, well, that was unfortunately probably some not sound advice.
That was not sound advice at all. No,
I've found through the years that the idea of saying things like, don't worry, it'll come back, is a really sort of dismissive and flippant response to people's hard-earned dollars. They don't like to hear that. And it you may be able to make a case for that in a broad sense, but that's being smart with your investments over a diversified portfolio. It likely will come back, but it never makes anybody feel any better in the moment. So we sort of stricken that from the record. I don't tend to say things like, don't worry, it'll come back anymore.
Good.
It's not a good position to have.
Right.
What about the best piece of financial advice you've ever been given?
When my Aunt Jean had lost my Uncle Paul, her husband, they found a financial planner. And actually, it was before my Uncle Paul passed away. He was in the funeral home business up in Colonial Beach, Virginia. Okay. And he got a financial planner. And they sat down and mapped out a plan. And my mom and dad had never done that. They had a great attorney here, and they had wills, but they didn't have a plan. And they did not have a financial planner working with them. So when my Uncle Paul passed away and my Aunt Jean was well taken care of by this financial planner, my mother and father took note of that.
Yes.
And said, let's engage a financial planner. Let's find somebody to do this work who knows what they're doing. Where my father may have known furniture very well and have done a great job in that, he wanted somebody, because he saw the example of this, and let's get somebody to do this. And that has come down through the family. So even though an investment for me is probably another topping on my pizza, I don't have a lot of money. You know, I work in radio, right? But the best probably advice I ever got was work with a financial planner. And I work with a certified financial planner who helps me with my investments, as meager as they are. And I don't have to worry about it because that part of my life I don't worry about. What little bit now I have, of course, invested. You know, my 3% is matched by the company's 3%, and you never miss it. And then you open a statement one day, it's like, wow,
hey, got to save some money.
Yeah, I got some money. You know, and this is cool and this is good. But having a financial, and I'm not just saying it because it is the best. But I had to think about that. What is the best financial advice I ever got? And it came not from somebody greeting me on the street or a relationship or a mailer, an income that came from family experience. When I saw my mom and dad be able to use a financial planner to help them through some very difficult. I really haven't shared this. I just thought of this. I don't know where our family would be right now after the death of my father had we not had what I consider to be an excellent financial planner who helped us, a great attorney as well. I'll mention Charles Dixon. He was the family attorney.
One of the best.
Yeah, and he was the guy who, just going back for a minute, he was the guy who came to me and said, we want to put in a city walk, we want to do this, we want to, and we need you on our side. It's the only time I've ever gotten behind a political issue is because Charles Dixon asked me to.
Yep.
And he said, we need you behind this, and we need to institute this. And what do you say to Charlie Dixon? Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's what you say. Right. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but getting a financial planner. So now I don't worry about it. What meager funds I have, I know are being well taken care of. And I'll look at that when retirement comes down the road, and I'll know that that's taken care of. And that really is to anybody, no matter what their funds look like, no matter where they are in life, whether they're just starting or whether they're finishing up, get a financial planner, because whatever area of expertise you may have, you probably don't have the expertise that a paid professional does. So get a financial advisor, get somebody that you trust, and let them handle that part of your life. And then you can go have fun playing radio.
That's a great commercial for us. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And I will say, just to echo that as well, we've had, through the years, I was grateful to be able to be mentored by a guy who's been in this business for a long time, and Carl Klein, and he taught me so much about relationships, but it is people's experiences that generally leads them in that direction. And even over the last handful of years, we've seen, because of the shift in demographics,
right,
we've seen kind of the equation change a little bit, particularly for younger investors, where it used to be you would just work, save, and
right,
eventually someday you'd retire. And a lot of our generation has seen our parents do that, only to maybe end up in poor health or other circumstances that cause that retirement idea to be cut short.
Yeah.
So now we're really having to find this balance between saving for the future, planning for the future, working for the future, but also planning for today.
Right.
Because we don't want to give up today for the sake of tomorrow, because we just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So we've learned to strike a new balance, I think, in our business in that regard. And so it's a project, and it certainly can be complicated, but it's a worthwhile endeavor for us. So
very good. Very good.
Well, Hal, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you. Very nice of you to ask me to do this.
You are a dream of a person for our community, and you've just done so much to keep Hickory together and keep Hickory going in the right direction. So thank you for all you do and all the people that you serve. Man,
thank you for those kind words. Very, very nice of you.
Absolutely. You. So again, just be sure to check out our website at www.seretirementplanners.com, and you can pull up all the information on our podcast, like and subscribe, and let us know if you have any questions or any feedback. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member of FINRA, SIPC. Southeast Retirement Planners is not affiliated with LPL Financial or registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor.